Green, and we're joined from Leeds by the Labour MP Anne Cryer. So Andrew, first of all, you heard Philippe Legraine's point there. Rebut him. I mean, why is he wrong to say that you're too narrow in your definition of economic benefit? It's much wider than you say.
Well, the first point to make is that he was talking almost entirely about East European immigrants. In fact, according to the government's figures, only 1 in 5 of our immigrants, net immigrants, come from Eastern Europe. So it's a much wider issue than East Europe. And secondly, his film certainly, and nobody else has rebutted what we've said, that if you take immigration as a whole, it certainly contributes to the economy, as he says, nobody denies that, but in terms of the benefit to the native population, it is tiny, it is pennies. And nobody's denied that.
Philippe, just on that narrow point, he's right, isn't he?
I absolutely deny that. He is talking very narrowly about the contribution to public finances. If immigrants contribute to boosting the rate of economic growth, to boosting the rate of productivity growth, then we are all richer as a society as a result of that. And if it's even 0.25% a year, after 20 years, we'll be 5% richer, which means the average person on 20 grand a year will be £1,000 richer each and every year. It's not pennies at all.
Let's bring in the politicians. Anne Cryer Leeds, on this narrow economic point, are you persuaded that actually it really is pennies for most of us?
There are problems, and I've had them put to me by one of my local employment agencies, who is a bit fed up with one of the more seedy employment agencies undercut him considerably by employing people from Eastern Europe, paying them the minimum wage, but then docking their wage by £2, £3 and £4 in lieu of rent, of food and buses and fares over here. That is no good either for the people who live here already or for the people who are coming into work.
So you're partly convinced by this, actually, then?
What I'm saying is that they are being mistreated, I think. Many of these people who are coming in, I mean, you know, we can't go too far down that road because we finish up with the cockle pickers on Morecambe Bay who were all killed. You know, you can't just say employment at any price. The people who are coming in from Eastern Europe must be employed properly, at proper rates of pay, with proper accommodation. And in many areas this is not happening. So it's no good for them, and it's no good for the firms who are competing against these rogue firms who are employing them under such conditions.
Well, Damien Green, you can see why some British businesses like this, because it's a source of cheap labour. I mean, on the narrow economic point again, do you basically agree that for those of us in the indigenous population, there's nothing in it for us?
All the evidence I've seen suggests that if you take it as an aggregate, then there is some benefit, but that it's probably not huge. But in a sense, I think that's inviting us to a simplistic conclusion of either concluding that all immigration is economically good or that all immigration is economically bad. And that, of course, is a nonsense. Some immigration has benefited us and will continue to benefit us. Uncontrolled, unlimited immigration won't benefit us, even economically. So what we want is an immigration system where you ask two questions, basically. The first is, will this individual benefit Britain economically? And secondly, if you have a very large number of those individuals who might benefit us economically, how many in any one year can we sensibly take in terms of pressure on social services, public services, the environment and so on? And when you can answer yes to both those questions, then you should set a limit and say that's how many we should have every year.
The implication of that, Philippe Legraine, is that there is a tipping point for those of us in this country. There may be some benefits, but there does come a point where we have to say no. We have to also select the good from the bad, and that's not being done.
No, I mean, at the point now about East Europeans being able to come here freely without claiming welfare benefits, they're only going to come here if there are jobs for them. If they don't have jobs, they're going to go back.
But undercutting indigenous British workers,
if they are fit, they're not undercutting British workers. They're doing jobs that British people simply won't do. Take the example of old age care. A British person, even with no GCSEs, no qualifications at all, do not want to work looking after old people. Now, the budget for looking after old people is basically fixed because of constraints on public finances. If we had to try and lure British people to try and do these jobs, we'd have to pay them 2 or 3 times more. What did that mean? That means that old people would go without care, or that taxes would have to go up in order to pay for it.
Sir Andrew.
They're not taking jobs from anybody.
Just before you leave the central point, let me give you a quote from the Professor of Economics at Cambridge. He said, "There's no evidence that large-scale immigration generates large-scale economic benefits for the existing population as a whole. On the contrary, all the research suggests that the benefits are either close to zero or negative.
That's simply not true. There's a study from Ottaviano and Perry which shows that a 10% rise in immigration, because immigrant labour is complementary to native labour, actually boosts wages by 3 to 4%. Why is that? It's because if you have foreign nannies, they allow an investment banker to go back to work. If you have foreign nurses, they make British doctors more productive.
Let me just bring in the politicians again on that. Anne Cryer, I mean, is there a tipping point? And do you think you've reached it? I mean, the sort of things that you were saying about what's happening in your constituency.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at this in too black and white a view. I mean, to talk about investment bankers benefiting from the fact that they can go back to work simply because they can employ a cheap au pair from, say, Poland. I mean, I just don't go for that at all. You know, we have to look at it in a wider context. What about the impact on Poland? The Polish government is extremely worried because they're losing so many people and their skills.
Right, but staying in Britain, I mean, are you saying if, in effect, it's a class thing, that basically the middle classes might do quite well out of it, but those people who are plasterers or plumbers are not going to do very well out of it?
I mean, I do agree with that. And also look at the other case of Polish people or people from Eastern European going to work in residential homes. Yes, of course we do need them. Our elderly people must be cared for, but let's not forget they must be cared for by people who speak their language. Many of the people from Eastern Europe don't. It is very disconcerting for an elderly person to be cared for by someone who doesn't know their language. So all of these things, there isn't a black and white case of good and bad. There are all sorts of pros and cons in this, and we must look at all of them.
Damien Green.
I rather agree with Anne's